I'm Danny, that witch next door, and you're listening to That Witch Podcast. Well, hello, neighbor. Welcome back to another episode of That Witch Podcast. I'm Danny. I'm that witch next door. If you've never been here before, I'm going to be your host, your guide, your mentor, and instructor in all things magic, witchcraft, astrology, and witchy business. And today I am so excited to be bringing all of you a brand new guest that you have probably not met through the neighborhood, though you might already be following her yourself on social media. Today we have Marisa, the current Hermit. And before I let Marisa kind of introduce herself, I just want to say I found Marisa a little while ago on Instagram, before TikTok, it was Instagram. And I just fell in love with her content and her teaching style for teaching reading tarot for yourself. So I could not wait to get you on the show. And I'm so excited. Marisa, would you say hello to everyone?
Hello, neighbors. So excited to be visiting you in the neighborhood.
Oh, it's so exciting. So, Marisa, will you first just tell us a little bit about you, what you do, both your double lives, if you will, like you were telling me before the show.
Yeah.
And then I always ask everyone that comes on the show their big three as well.
All right. Well, hello again. I'm Marisa. I am a Virgo sun, hence the hermit part of the current hermit, a Capricorn moon, and a Cancer rising. So I'm very moon sensitive and I follow the moon very closely in my practice. And a huge part of my practice is reading tarot for myself daily, if I can. I do work in a corporate setting full time, but I moonlight, pun intended, as a tarot mentor on social media. And it's been a really fulfilling experience to be able to empower others to use tarot in order to grow with the flow and just manifest their best lives.
I love that. Grow with the flow. That's beautiful. That's really, really beautiful. So, especially because there are so many bumps and hills that we encounter on this journey. It's definitely
my gosh, yes.
a flow. So tell us a little bit about your tarot journey, and most specifically, where did the current hermit come from? How long have you been doing that now?
The current hermit has been a social media platform I've had on Instagram for about 2 years consistently, and on TikTok sort of inconsistently for about a year or so. And I came to connect with tarot through following the moon and studying astrology, because astrology has so many astrological correspondences to the cards. And I really did not begin to embrace the idea that I was witchy until much later in life.
Okay.
The same year that I entered my Saturn return, there was a really impactful eclipse 6 months prior. And I didn't know it at the time, but it activated really significant places in my birth chart. And of course, as I mentioned before, I'm a Capricorn moon. So my moon is ruled by Saturn. And I'm a Cancer rising. So my traditional ruler of my chart is the moon. And that means eclipses are a really big deal for me. And so is my Saturn return. And it kind of just awakened a part of myself I hadn't really gotten to know yet. And I just started learning everything I could about why the moon affected me so much, which led to me learning about my birth chart and astrology, which led me to reading tarot as a personal development tool so that I could track it all on a daily, monthly basis. Kind of really use the cards as markers for where I was on my journey.
I love that. First, I am very biased, but I love Capricorn moon placement. It's one of my all-time favorite placements. I love it. And it's so funny because I genuinely forget that the moon is supposed to be in detriment in Capricorn, because that's how much I love that placement so much. There's such grounding in a Capricorn moon that this little Pisces moon probably craves a lot Probably craves a lot of that. You remind me a lot of myself when I describe beginning of my witchcraft and the beginning of my astrology journey, actually, where I just got hooked onto something, and I've never been someone that's like, oh, I wonder what that is, and I can just go about my life. Like, if I find it intriguing, I'm like, I must get to the bottom of this. I have to know everything about it. And I very, very recently, tarot has always been spotty for me. Like, I do it for big chunks of time and then I drift away from it. And I've had this really big resurgence over all of 2022, quite honestly. And it was a huge reason why I followed you. I was like, oh, this is exactly what I'm needing. I need more tarot for myself. I just recently went on your profile and like dug around for our book recommendations that you had on there. Cause I was like, I need a tarot book and I trust Marisa. That's who I'm going to go look for. And I went and dug around in your highlights and found some books that you recommended. Because I do think that even though, you know, I have read tarot professionally, I've read tarot for other people for a really long time, there's this huge difference in reading it for yourself. It's a totally and completely different journey. Will you tell us a little bit about how this came about, why you teach tarot for self versus reading for others, and why you don't give readings professionally? Did you used to?
I haven't given readings professionally, mostly because I found that my style of reading tarot for other people was to teach them to read the cards themselves.
That's my problem.
Like I am a person who doesn't really love to be told what to do myself. My birth cards in tarot are Death and the Emperor, and I feel like that combination is just kind of like, you know, bit of a sacred rebel, if you will. And so I prefer to do it myself and to empower you to do it yourself. And I think that there really are so many reasons why I prefer to teach and treat tarot for myself instead of give professional readings. And the first of which being, I think it makes more sense to read tarot for yourself when you use it as a personal development and manifesting tool. Whereas others who use tarot for like future predictions, you know, then I think if that's the way you like to use tarot, you should probably read more tarot for other people, because it's not necessarily the greatest idea to be predicting your future on a daily basis.
Yeah.
You know, like if you're going to use it in that way, maybe it's not the best daily practice for yourself. And the second reason being, I find that when people sit down for a tarot reading, even in the few that I had done when I first started for friends and family, people really want to know what their future is when they sit down for a reading. And it's just not my style. You know what I mean? And as mainstream as tarot has become, it's still really hard to get away from that. And I may have touched on this already, but probably the third and most overarching reason is that I really would prefer to teach you how to give yourself the answer rather than me telling you what I think. Because in my opinion, the wisdom of the cards is more authentically intuitive when it comes from you, especially in the style that I read, where it's a personal development type thing. And then I told you there were a lot of reasons, but I would say the fourth,
I love it.
I don't want to give it another like numbered bullet on the list, maybe just an asterisk, but the connection that tarot has to scammer culture,
I know,
especially in 2022, is kind of a lot. And, you know,
it's a lot.
I think there are still a lot of people who don't believe in tarot and think it's a bunch of hocus pocus and there's no merit to it. And on top of that, as you know, Danny, because I think you've even had a couple of these, but there's this huge problem on social media with scammers impersonating tarot readers. And
it's horrible. It's absolutely horrible.
It's despicable. Like, I just, you know, in all the time that it takes you to go to somebody's profile and copy everything verbatim and like steal all the work that I've already done, like you could have gone and made money any other way.
Yeah.
In the time it takes you to do that. And I I just never wanted anyone to think that this tool that changed my life is a scam. And I feel like I can prove that it's not better by teaching you how it can work for you
I really
than me
love
trying
that.
to like give you a reading. Do you know what I mean?
I know
Like
exactly
if I
what
can
you
teach
mean.
you to use it for yourself, I think that kind of like breaks the facade that the whole thing's BS, you know?
Absolutely. And one thing that really, really strongly comes up for me is no matter the branch of magic or spirituality that we're talking about, when you make your own connection, it will always be more profound than someone else making it for you. And I've had some very profound spiritual readings, not just tarot, but like Akashic records, past life. Like I've had some very high quality spiritual services, absolutely. And it's not that they're not profound, but they will never ever ever hit like the tidal wave that hits you when you make your own connections for yourself. I totally agree. And I don't know if you or anyone who else is listening remembers a little while ago, a few months ago on the podcast, we had Andrea of Dream Life Connection on here, and we were talking about dream work. And it really reminds me of this because she talked about why it's really hard to lean on like dream interpretation books all the time. Because even though we're analyzing archetypal symbols and it's this same, sure, we can look at some universal themes. What really matters, and it comes down to at the end of the day, is your relationship to those symbols. And
exactly.
Yes, your relationship is completely different. Only you know it as well as you do. Nobody else that you ever, the best psychic, the best tarot reader in the entire world never will truly be able to actually latch into your mind and fully understand your bond and your experience with these different symbols. And so I totally agree that no matter what, it's always going to hit way stronger when you're reading for yourself. I definitely agree that when you're using tarot for self-development, if you really want to access its full potential, you need your own practice. You can't rely on somebody else to give you the full extent that a tarot practice really, truly can offer you. I recently decided, I think a couple months ago now, I was like, you know what? Tarot and journaling for me just go together. I'm not going to do one without the other anymore. If I'm grabbing my journal anyways, I'm going to grab the cards. If I'm grabbing the cards anyways, I'm going to make sure to grab a journal with it. And ever since I've done that, it really truly has made it into this self-development ritual and routine far, far beyond seeking answers all the time. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I know exactly what you mean. I, from the very beginning, have always kept a tarot journal, whether I typed it up in Google Docs or I had a notebook that I always kept with me. And another journaling system that's very popular is that 5-minute journal thing. Have you ever used that?
No, tell us about that.
So the 5-minute journal is like this really pretty journal that has the same prompts in it for every single day.
Okay.
It's like a gratitude list and affirmations and what would make today great. And then there's also a night pages section. I really love doing journaling in the morning and at night so I can recap my tarot reading in my day. And I no longer use the book, the notebook itself, because I have the prompts memorized at this point. And so I just incorporate it into my tarot journal. And so I've kind of like taken these two things and like melded them together in a way that really works for me. And in the tarot deck I'm using right now, the MoonChild tarot, there are affirmations for each card in the deck.
Oh my God, I love that.
Right? Mind blown. So there's an affirmation for the upright meaning of the card and for the reversed.
We might have to link that deck.
So I just started using this deck a month ago. I'm really excited that I purchased it. It feels very right as a Cancer rising that this is in
Yes.
my collection.
Absolutely.
But
It's
yeah.
called MoonChild. Yeah. That's perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
But I've been using those affirmations for the cards that I've been pulling
Mm-hmm.
daily in my journaling now. So I no longer try to write my own. Well, I try to write at least one of my own affirmations, but
Mm-hmm.
I'll use the ones that come up for the cards as well. And it feels really, um, oh, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, integral. It feels really
Yeah.
integrated in a way
Mm-hmm.
that's like
Mm-hmm.
very intentional, and it's been great. I highly recommend.
How magical. One thing that you shared really recently on your page that has resonated so strongly with me. I actually shared it and shared your profile with my students in that witch school because of it. Is
Oh
your
my gosh, that
your
makes my heart happy.
I'm so glad. It is your tarot daily do and don't. And that
Yes.
because so I pull, to give everyone a little context, if I had to kind of give you my default settings, I guess, with tarot, it's definitely a 3 card. I do. I'm lots of witches and lots of people, right? We operate in threes. Threes are very harmonious to me. So like I lean there, but I don't do that if I don't have the ample time to really sit with all 3 cards. And
Hmm.
then I started finding, well, I like never have time for this like every single morning. I don't have time for 3 cards. So what's the solution here? And barely after I had even thought about this, maybe a couple days later, you had shared, "Oh, are you not having time for this long reading in the morning? Try just pulling 2 cards, a do and a don't." And I was like, I love this is the exact kind of tarot practice that I love, and I love teaching everybody because and leave it to a Virgo sun to come up with it, honestly, because it's less is more. Like sometimes it's those
Hmm.
simple, really concise practices. And that's the reason you're able to do something every single day, which ends up making it way more profound than me being able to set aside a full. I mean, if it were up to me, I'd love to be able to sit for a full scrumptious like hour with 3 cards and just,
Oh my God,
you know what I
yes.
mean? That's like my treat. My self-care time is non-rushed tarot time, and I don't have to go fast or anything, and I get to have like 3 different reference books next to me and go through every single piece, journal everything. That's my luxury time. But for my tarot daily routine, because I really have been wanting to get back to that, this do and don't. And it's so funny you bring up the 5-minute journal and how it has night pages. Because what I've been doing is the tarot do and don't every morning. And then I journal my reflections about that at the end of the day based on like, oh, I took this do and my don't into my day. Where did I end up today with that? And it's
I love
been
that.
so profound. I love it.
Yeah.
I
I
love that.
also am a person who prefers 3 and sometimes 4 card
Mm-hmm.
spreads. My original go-to that I posted a lot um, on my Instagram with
Mm-hmm.
was called Grow with the Flow.
Mm-hmm.
And it was 3 cards, 1 card for celebrate, 1 card for learn, 1 card for release. And
Oh, nice.
recently had been going through a couple of changes. I changed jobs and the
Mm-hmm.
hours are different. And I was finding that I could not commit to my Grow with the Flow spread on weekdays. It was really hard to sit with it as long as I wanted to with 3
Mm-hmm.
cards. And I was like, okay, we're not going to not read tarot like before
Right.
we're going to like go into a new work situation and interact with new work people. Like it's more important now than ever to keep my witchy and spiritual practices that ground me. We can't just skip
Yes.
those in a
Right.
new
That's
situation.
not the solution.
So that is not the solution, even though we're filming, feeling overwhelmed with newness. That's
Right.
not the solution. So that's kind of how the today's do and don't was born, because 1 card does not feel like enough.
I agree. I totally agree.
um,
Really
of
great when you're
course,
starting out as 1 card. It's a nice quick dose, especially if you're feeling crazy overwhelmed with the deck. I will say that I mean, God, I did a daily single card pull for years,
Yes.
But
Yes.
I agree. Now there's this not enoughness feeling.
Mm-hmm.
I
And
need
I'm so glad
dynamic.
you said that, because I was literally about to say, when you are a brand new beginner and you've just bought your first tarot deck,
Mm-hmm.
do not feel like either of us is saying that for you, one card isn't enough and you should
Right.
be doing two. But it's not, I don't think what Danny or I meant. When you're just learning, one card is more than
Oh
enough.
yeah.
Um, and on that note, I would like to maybe just plug a tarot tip.
Please
Please
do.
resist the, yeah, I can't help myself. I'm sorry. But on the note that when you're a beginner, one card is more than enough as you're learning, please, please resist the urge to pull a clarifier card. You do not need it.
Interesting.
You do
Okay,
not
elaborate
need
on
it.
that for us a little bit.
So, this is probably one of my tarot hot takes, is that I don't think that clarifier cards are needed even as an advanced practitioner.
Okay.
If you cannot think of a specific follow-up question to your reading,
Mm-hmm.
you cannot articulate exactly what it is you want to know, or how you want to deepen the message, it is my recommendation as a mentor that you do not pull another card if you can't define what else you want to know. And I think that especially when you are brand new and you are still getting comfortable accessing your inner truth, following your intuition, and learning the card meanings, if you feel stuck, don't pull another card. Just sit with it. Maybe walk away from your reading if you have to, revisit it the following morning or that night. But I find the more cards that are on the table as a brand spanking new beginner, the more confused you're probably going to be. At least that was my experience. And that's been my experience when I mentor people on social media. Some of the common questions and challenges that I do get are about court cards or reversals, but also people will come to me with specific situations in which they did a reading for themselves and they feel like they can't read for themselves because this reading didn't work out. It was very confusing. And then we have a conversation about the reading.
Okay.
And I get a little bit more information about their experience, and they're new, they're brand new. They've only been reading tarot for a couple of months. They needed to ask the tarot about an emotionally charged situation in which they did not use a spread, no predetermined questions, no grounded intent set for the reading. And they just pulled a card to see, what can you tell me about the situation? And it didn't make sense to them. So then they pulled another card and another card and another card and another card. And before they knew it, they had 6 cards in front of them. They were like, I'm confused. I can't read tarot for myself. And I was like, yes, you can. You just have to go back to the beginning, set an intent for your reading, choose a spread that you think would help you through your issue, and just stick to that. And when you're a beginner, a small spread, 3 cards at most, so that's, when you're a beginner, 1 card is more than enough, I promise. You guys can always reach out to me on social media if you are feeling super, super stuck with 1 card. Like it's been days.
Sure.
And you're like, Marissa, I sat with it for days. I still don't know what it means. Like, any ideas? Like, I'm obviously happy to help through those situations. But yeah, trust yourself.
Yeah.
You don't need it. You're an intuitive bad bitch and you don't need to pull a clarifier card.
I love this take. This is a hot little take. If for those that don't know, clarifiers are relatively common, relatively encouraged. And I've only ever pulled them, honestly, in the most recent years of my practice. I didn't even really start out pulling clarifier cards. I've scrapped a reading and started over before, back in the day. I've definitely scrapped readings and started over. But what I'll say is I love the idea of instead of pulling kind of just immediately pulling a clarifier card, having yourself pause and genuinely ask a specific clarifying question. Because that is different. That is very, very, very different. And
you pull it with intent. Like,
and I really like
intent.
that. Yes, I like that a lot. Now, I will say, and both you and I know agree on this, if there's one thing I will always advise, it's if any part of tarot, any part of the process feels forced and aggressive and uncomfortable, it's not the time in the day for a reading. You need to, I would walk away. And there have definitely been times where in the beginning years of my practice, or even kind of middle-ish years on the timeline I'm on right now, that I'd show up with some emotionally charged intent, no grounding, no cleansing. Let's be honest, I was in a space of demanding, right? I grab my deck because I'm confused. I feel messy inside. Give me clarity. And totally, I want a lot of my intermediate and advanced tarot readers to reflect on this for themselves when you've grabbed your deck in more of a demanding space. Because when I thought about that, that made me think of the clarifiers, where you're kind of, there's this attitude, this mindset you can have where it's like, I don't understand what you mean. Be more clear. But the truth is that the cards are clear. Absolutely. I totally agree. One thing that has absolutely changed my practice over the last month, honestly, one of the books, and I'll put these in the description for everybody. One of the books I saw that you recommended in your Instagram story highlights was Tarot for Yourself by Mary K. Greer. I love it.
Love Tarot for Yourself.
Because it's half journal workbook, half very textbook, you're learning, trust me, you're reading this book at the same time, but it is so much more interactive than other tarot books. Holy cow, it's so much more interactive. And one thing I used to do that I haven't, and this book reminded me and got me to circle back around, was really meditating with the card, right? Really meditating with the imagery, sitting with it, like you said. I think that one of the best practices to replace that kind of demanding clarifier card pull is this exercise in the book, which is just look at the card and ask, what lesson are you teaching me? What are you here to teach me? And then you turn it into kind of a little automatic writing exercise, and you just start writing instantly what comes to you, and let you kind of channel the card and allow the messages to come through. And that, my friends, I promise you, I've done it myself multiple times now. It has been so much clearer, so much more profound, resonated so much more doing that versus pulling anything additional.
Yes, I agree wholeheartedly. And that is my best tip I could possibly give when you just feel super stuck with a card. Just automatic write. Just write down everything you know about this card, because you've been studying, trust yourself. And then go back, reread it, and literally physically cross out what doesn't resonate with you.
Ooh, I really like that.
Yes. So do the exercise, as you've mentioned, from Tarot for Yourself. But then when I've done it, I've gone back, reread it, and physically crossed out what wasn't resonating. And then from there, I had my reading.
I love that idea. I really love that idea. And kind of like one line too, so you can still read what you wrote there at one point. That was a tip in Tarot for Yourself as well. They were like, if you ever cross anything out, just draw one line through it. Yes. So you're able to actually read what you said at one point, because it can totally land in a different way. Oh my gosh, I love this. So I think that the biggest question I personally get that I was really excited to ask you is your advice for folks that are trying to create, build, or maintain a practice, and their biggest struggle is consistency with routine and ritual. I think that Oh, and I'm glad to ask a Virgo sun because I think a lot of people get bogged down by perfectionism. I do. I think a lot of people are like, if I can't do it exactly as my expectations draw it out in my mind, throw it all away.
It's so funny that you say that because I think that the only way my practice has been able to evolve
Mm-hmm.
as a Virgo sun and Virgo Mercury, so like how I learn and
Ooh,
take in
very
information
interesting.
is
Okay.
also in Virgo. The only way that my practice has been able to grow over time is by doing things, even if I don't feel they're perfect. That is the only way that I have been able to continue to evolve and grow with the flow, as I say. And I think that it's so much easier said than done, especially in the age of social media. But don't compare your practice or your rituals to anybody else. Like your practice does not need to look like anybody else's. Your practice is not less perfect because it doesn't mirror what you're seeing online.
Mm-hmm.
Really like honor your authentic inner truth and do what works for you. And the way that you can start to maybe figure that out, just start small, set really small, achievable goals for yourself. Baby steps. Set a timer for 10 minutes, light a candle, pull one card, write down everything that comes up before the timer goes off, and then put it away.
Ooh, timer is a great trick. I like that.
Oh, I feel like that's definitely like a Virgo placement thing.
Totally.
I
I love it.
I sometimes use like the timer app on my phone to keep myself on track, especially if I feel like I have a lot of things to do today
Yeah.
and I want to do all the things. I'll be like, okay, set a timer for 10 minutes. I'm going to clean.
Mm-hmm.
And set a timer for 10 minutes. I'm going to review my tarot pull from earlier, like that kind of thing. But that would be my suggestions for trying to create a routine and a practice with tarot. Just start with 10 minutes, you know?
Mm-hmm. I agree that without the consistency, it's another thing that really ends up inhibiting your growth and potential. It's not that it's not going to be useful. I promise. No matter the amount of spreads you do, they'll land right. But it's with that consistency and that regular practice that something starts growing and building, I think. And like you said, at the beginning, I love this intention of using tarot to track one's progress and to track one's journey. I think that you're so right that so many people, I think it comes from a lot of places. I think it comes from a lot of places and multiple stigmas that kind of form into one big stereotype that tarot is best used for future. And I agree that I have always encouraged, this is why I stopped reading tarot professionally and offering readings professionally, was because of the future stuff and the relationship stuff. And the lack of accountability that I was confronted with over and over again, day in and day out. And I would start to almost, I even had a few clients, especially during those high turnover days, that would almost insult the deck. And rightfully so. That's very offensive, by the way. It's very, very offensive to insult someone's deck. Like the cards are doing something to you. Like they're not giving you the answer that you want. It was, yeah, that's why I never did any metaphysical fairs or anything like that when I was really trying to build my tarot career at the time. Yeah, which I'm glad for because I needed more intentional clients than that. But I really found that over and over and over again, people came and were looking for the answer I knew they already had. I know they already knew it. I knew every single time it would come out and I'd be like, you already know exactly what I'm going to tell you right now. And I started really encouraging clients to start shifting the structure of their questions. And instead of asking, how can I get this exact job that I want or whatever, I would really try to encourage people to ask questions like, what can I do right now that helps me access my full potential?
Yes. Yes. I think that having accountability for yourself, especially when you read tarot for yourself,
Mm-hmm.
is so incredibly important. And it's funny that you bring up like doing relationship readings
Mm-hmm.
as a reason that like reading tarot for other people kind of started to burn you out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, most of those situations that I described where somebody like comments on my post and said like,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, I can't read tarot for myself. I did a reading, it was very confusing." And then I go to help that person, we end up having a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
9 times out of 10, it's about a relationship issue.
Yep. It's an
And they
emotionally charged situation, like you said. Mm-hmm.
yes. And they feel that they're not quite ready to let go
Mm-hmm.
of the view they had of the
Correct.
relationship. I feel like that could be a whole nother
Oh,
like
yeah. I could talk
that
for
could be a
hours
whole
about that.
nother like workshop I could probably do, is just how to read tarot for yourself for your relationship for you and your
Yes.
partner.
Because it can be very effective. I agree with you. I don't think
Yes.
that romance or relationships or partnerships of any kind should be off the table as far as what you're asking the cards. I totally agree. But holy moly, are so many people misguided in how to approach that. Holy, yeah. Where it's definitely, I agree with you. It can be very, this is going to be my hot take. Get ready.
I love it. I'm ready.
I love hopping on a live tarot reading on social media with the right reader, with the right person that aligns with a lot of the views that you and I are talking about. Hell yeah. I love hearing them read for other people because I learn and expand my interpretation style by listening to other people interpret. So no matter what, I love hearing people talk about the cards. Where I really struggle with are this digital version of these high turnover tarot readers of doling out like the hot gossip, essentially. That's kind of the headspace and kind of the energy around the whole entire thing. This happens in the astrological community all the time as well. And that's not just tarot. This happens all the time. It's the same and in line with my same huge pet peeve when people water Venus down to, our relationship planet. And I'm like, oh my God, our Venus placement is so much more than your like little Cupid or whatever in your chart. Holy cow, life. And that's, I think, my biggest message is life is so much more multifaceted than this one relationship that you're looking into.
Yes. Yes.
It really, really,
sure.
totally is. So, Marisa, you have lots and lots of followers. You have great account engagement. Honestly, just as a social media entrepreneur, yeah, you are a lot to look up to. I promise. You truly are. You are.
Thank you so much.
You get a lot of people asking questions. I would love to go back really quick to a couple things that you brought up in the common questions and challenges I forgot to ask you. You said that a lot of people ask you about reversals and about court cards. What are the most common questions or challenges you get with those? And what do you find yourself so often advising? Because I guarantee we've got some neighbors here that would really love to hear that information.
So I think that reversals like clarifier cards are very, very common in tarot. And there are some people who like almost religiously use clarifier cards, and there are some people that almost religiously use reversals. You guys know what I think about clarifier cards. And I'm mentioning them in tandem because I feel like it ties back to the same issue.
Okay.
I get asked a lot whether or not you should read reversals, and I think you should do what feels right for you in your practice. That's always my first answer. I don't want to be the type of mentor that tells people what to do. I'm a death emperor, as we've discussed. It's not really my thing. I don't really love it. I wouldn't do it to you either. I think that it depends on the deck when it comes to tarot reversals.
I totally agree. I am so glad you said that. I have certain decks. I think I only have 2 I don't read reversals in, but I'm so glad you said that.
I think it depends on the deck, and it depends on your level of experience. When you are a brand new tarot reader and you're just starting to learn the cards, it is perfectly okay to just start with the upright. It is okay. It is perfectly okay to set rules and boundaries with your tarot deck and with your spirit team and say, I'm only going to read upright cards until I feel ready or called to learn the reversals.
Mm-hmm.
It's totally okay to do that. And I highly recommend that you do that in the beginning. That being said, once you start to feel comfortable, maybe incorporating reversals into your practice, you may find that you don't want to do that with some decks.
Mm-hmm.
The MoonChild Tarot, as I mentioned before, it's by Danielle Noel. I've only been using it for about a month to 6 weeks, but I love this deck so far. This deck was created with reversals in mind. Reversals are included in the tarot guidebook.
Okay.
And so with this deck, I use reversals. But with another deck that I absolutely love, that's probably like one of my favorite decks of all time, the Antique Anatomy Tarot.
Oh, I love that one. I have
Doesn't
her
include
Oracle
reversals,
deck.
though.
Interesting. I didn't
I'm
know
pretty sure it
that.
doesn't.
Very interesting.
Hold on. Now I feel like I want to go check
Grab
the
it.
guidebook, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't. Hold on one sec. Because I don't want to like misspeak and then I confuse everybody. Yeah, there are no reversals in this guidebook. So
very interesting.
For the Antique Anatomy Tarot, that deck was not created with reversals in mind.
Mm-hmm.
And so don't use reversals when I read that deck.
Mm-hmm.
Also, the Antique Anatomy Tarot is more like a pip style deck. Everything is just like minimalistic images of like beautiful, like antique anatomy, Victorian stuff and like flowers. And it's so beautiful. But like, it's not as visually intuitive as some other decks that include like a whole picture that maybe includes people or animals that we're personifying. And so that is another reason that with the style of that deck, I also would not read reversals with it, you know, because you can't, there's less to visually intuit from it, if that makes sense.
It definitely does.
So I think the only thing that scares me about reversals is when people just completely refuse to acknowledge them.
Okay.
Like with any deck at all. And that just makes me nervous because the reversals are there for a reason.
Yeah.
You know, like tarot wouldn't have reversals if they didn't have some lesson or medicine to offer us.
Right.
And why would you limit yourself to 58 meetings when like you could do like, oh God, what is 50? That number times 2. 78 times 2.
78 times 2. I just did this the other day. It is, yeah, because for a full standard deck, that would be, 156. 156.
Okay.
There it is.
That's why I confused myself and I said 56 first. And I was like, Marissa, that's not how many cards are in the deck. What are you saying? Why would you only use 78 meanings when you could use 156 at your disposal? Like for me, as a detail-oriented person who's very analytical, that doesn't quite make sense. And I think that the need to pull extra clarifier cards and the desire not to use reversals at all in your practice, it kind of sounds like spiritual bypassing to me, if I'm being honest. It's like you don't want to deal with the scarier, harder, typically more negative version of the card. Like, it's not always true that the reversed is more negative than the upright meaning.
Agreed.
There are some people that see it that way. And so I feel in an effort to avoid that, some readers will just say, I'm not going to use it.
Right.
Like, I don't want to know if it's going to be worse. And I'm like, okay.
The biggest thing with that is that there's already cards in the deck that are quote unquote negative. And so technically, so like, for example, I highly prefer getting 3 of Swords reversed versus getting 3 of Swords upright.
Yeah.
I've always interpreted Three of Swords reversed as the swords coming out of the heart. Healing can finally take place, right? We're losing the conflict. We're on the way to resolution. I would much rather pull that one in reverse than upright. So that's always my argument for that. And I do agree with you that you always anchor into your own intuition and what you feel guided to. And also, we have to be honest with ourselves when sometimes we say that we're being intuitive and exactly we're actually blocking ourselves off and we don't realize it, but limiting ourselves.
Exactly. I feel like you're cutting yourself off from half the deck. You're working with half
Yeah.
the tools in the toolbox by not reading
Yeah.
reversals. If you're working with a deck that lends itself to reversals, there are some decks that weren't created with that purpose or
Totally.
intention, and so I don't read reversals with those.
Totally.
But in general, yeah, reversals are cool. They teach you more about the tarot and about yourself and about your shadow side. I
Yeah,
think that
that's
it's an
my biggest
important part of
thing.
the
Yep,
practice,
me too. It always went hand in hand with the shadow self and the unconscious in my mind. And just like we shouldn't shut off that part of ourselves, I that's one of my biggest I guess beliefs or values as a death witch is not shaming our underworld. You know what I mean? Not
Yes.
shaming and closing it off. And I really imagine people like toddlers like closing their eyes and ears and like la 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 la, I can't hear you. And I'm like, but it's there. But it's there for a reason. I love that you use the words there could be lessons and medicine in those reversals for us. And I could
Yeah.
not agree more. I read reversals. When I get a deck, I always do a big sloppy shuffle to get them mixed all around. Always. I spread them out on my bedspread. And because I did that when I was a kid, I've always had a really, really, really deep relationship with just card decks in general. I was raised on playing cards. That is something that goes back generations and generations. And so I loved when you'd get a brand new deck that was all in order. I would get it all messy and mixed up as much as possible. And when I started reading tarot, I was the shadow girl, so I didn't even think to leave out reversals. But I immediately would try and make sure some would be right side up and some would be upside down. But I'm glad that you bring up taking the deck and the artist's intention into consideration, because this is super skipped over. I know that you are a big fan of Rider-Waite-Smith deck, just like I am.
Yes.
Huge fan, and very convenient if you are, because it's the most popular, I would at least say. And I try not to get caught up in the argument if it's the quote unquote best or not. It's the most common right now. It's the most popular. It has been for a long time. If you're a beginner, it's just probably going to make it easier if you learn through the Rider-Waite-Smith lens. That's always my best advice there. But
I kind of think of the Rider-Waite-Smith deck as like Latin when it comes to languages. Like Latin is not the best language, but if you can learn Latin, you can probably apply that knowledge to several other languages that you're going to pick up,
Exactly. I'm not saying that is a perfect analogy. I'm not saying the Rider-Waite-Smith deck is the best ever. It's always going to depend on the reader, whatever you think the best deck is, because it's going to be the deck that reads best for you. But I agree that when you learn the Rider-Waite-Smith through that lens, you're going to set yourself up for such better success. I think I'm going to give you, this is my a little beginner hot take. A lot of people tell you to just get the decks that call to you. And I say that it depends on how far you want to take this practice, because I do believe there is so much more longevity in learning the Rider-Waite-Smith deck as early as possible. And all those other decks that are calling you, and they're probably calling you for a reason, but you're going to unlock their potential so much better and more efficiently with this background knowledge first. Because that's one of the most common hangups I see are people just go for the first pretty deck that, right? There's so many, and an artist does it in this way that, like, I am a mermaid lover. So there were so many beautiful mermaid decks that I wanted to get at the beginning. It was one of the first decks I got. And I never could fully get it all the way without, I just really never could until my true tarot study, when I sat down, was like, all right, I'm going to learn the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, and I'm going to go about this in the quote unquote traditional way. I'm going to call it the modern traditional way because it's not that old of a deck in the spectrum of time. But as soon as I did that, I got the tarot coloring book from Teresa Reed. That made a huge, huge, huge difference for me because I had to pay attention to the colors and the symbols for a really long time to color each page. And after that, all these other decks started coming to life, and they don't really do that without the background knowledge. And that's because that artist put all of that energy of the Rider-Waite-Smith deck into their interpretation.
I couldn't agree more with you. I mean, I learned on a traditional Rider-Waite-Smith. I used that deck for a very long time before I moved on to purchase decks I thought were prettier, like the Antique Anatomy Tarot, like the MoonChild Tarot. I will say though, like if you feel just like vehemently opposed to using the Rider-Waite-Smith, like if you were just like, I think it's ugly and I can't learn with it, there are now modern versions of the Rider-Waite-Smith that maybe are more your aesthetic, that are almost the same pictures verbatim. Like the one that comes to mind immediately is the Modern Witch Tarot.
Absolutely.
I love that deck.
Me too.
I love that deck. If you find the Rider-Waite-Smith deck original imagery is just like not working for you, you don't like the colors, you don't like whatever about it, try that deck. And I think that something like that is just as good to start with. If you are going to go with a deck that has a completely different style than the original Rider-Waite-Smith imagery, I would get yourself a really good resource book to use with that deck. I wouldn't necessarily rely on that deck's guidebook to teach you tarot. I would get another additional supplementary resource that has the original images in the book for you to compare and contrast.
Beautiful advice. I totally agree. I've always told people at least look up the image online, but I love the idea of just get yourself a really solid reference book that resonates with you, that already has the imagery. One of my earliest decks that I got, because it checked all the boxes, it was pretty, but it was so closely based on the Rider-Waite-Smith deck that's really popular and easy to find if anyone else is interested too, is the Golden Universal Tarot from oh my God, I love it's got like gold flecks on it and it's all metallic and gold foiling. That's why I loved it. But the imagery is still very artistic. It's definitely a little prettier. It's definitely a little bit prettier. The back of the cards are prettier. I don't blame anyone if you ever buy decks for the back, because I get it. I love the backs of cards. 100%.
Yeah. I feel like when you're like an Instagram tarot witch, like you really like the back of the card is important. You know what I mean?
Agree.
Like,
yes,
it's going to end up all in your videos, all over your feed. Like it's important.
Exactly.
It's silly, but it is.
Now take us on this court card journey, because I also find that this is a big, big hang up. There's a lot of like old rules versus new rules, I feel like, with court cards.
Oh my God. Yeah. there are definitely a lot of rules with court cards.
Oh, and tell us who the court cards are for anybody that doesn't know.
Oh, yes. Getting ahead of myself. So the court cards, there are 4 court cards in each of the 4 suits of tarot. There's a king, a queen, a knight, and a page. And typically in traditional tarot reading, there is a gender, age hierarchy assigned to all of them. And people tend to use those traditional rules as way to identify the court cards as like people in your life.
Yep.
I find that that does not work as well as the astrological correspondences to
Oh,
those
I'm
court
so glad
cards.
you're bringing this up. Yay.
I think that, in modern situations, like that is a much better identifier for who this court card might be referring to in your life. Court cards could also be referring to you. Like I find that the ones that I identify most with are the Page of Pentacles and the Queen of Cups. Those are two that when they come up, I know they're talking about me. Because I'm a Cancer rising and I have very predominant earth placements in my chart. So those are the two for me that I identify with. Also Queen of Wands, because she's just so awesome. She's
I
badass. I love her.
love that card.
Such a great card. But they can also just be read as energy. Do you know what I mean? And I think that
I totally agree.
people get really confused. They're like, is this a person or is this an energy? Like, what do I do? And my best recommendation I can make for you is to look up the astrological correspondences. Don't look up the, like, a knight is a young man with dark hair and, he is very aggressive because he's like, I don't know, maybe one of the Knight of Swords or something. Like, I don't even remember what they are because I don't use them. Like the original references that there are when you traditionally look at court cards. Look up the astrological correspondences and then make a list of people in your life that you interact with on a daily basis, like the people who touch your soul daily. And what do you know about their astrology, even if it's just their sun sign? And then from there, put them in a category for each card. And another way to do it is to just look at the keywords for each court card and the way that it's described and the way that you respond to it visually. And then put people on like lists for like, Queen of Swords, King of Pentacles, based on that. And then that's like your little list. That's like your chart. And when those court cards come up, depending on the other cards around it, it may be about that person or it may be an energy. And when it's an energy, ask yourself, if I met this person, this court card, as a person in real life right now, what would they be trying to teach me? What kind of conversation would we have? And that's kind of how you identify interpreting it as an energy as opposed to a person.
I love
Does that kind of make sense?
It definitely does. I'm so glad you bring up the astrological correspondences because astrology unlocked my tarot practice. Tarot unlocks my astrology studies and practice 100%. There's so much that they fuel and feed to one another. I really, really, I cannot recommend enough that when you start going a little bit further and looking up because it does require that extra step, right? It's probably not in your guidebook. That came with the deck, right? The astrological correspondences of each card. It does require this little extra step. I promise you, it's going to personify those cards so much more. And I love that you bring that up. So much more. Because I agree. One of the biggest kind of downfalls with both, actually, astrology and tarot, is these hard and fast rules. And there is no room for true intuitive interpretation when we're simply abiding by hard and fast rules. Structure and limitations and boundaries exist for a reason. We shouldn't just ignore them by any means. But these two things do not have to be separate from one another. We don't have to be only logical and practical and by the book, right? Or by our lessons, if you will. Or only, because I've even had, long ago, I even had a client who, it was in my earliest days. She was probably one of my very first readings. I had this wonderful resource that I recommend to people all the time. But Labyrinthos has these really easy little cheat sheets for free that you can print right off of their website. And they're perfect because they each have like 3 keywords per card. And I loved that because I don't need to read paragraphs and paragraphs. Sometimes when I was just starting out, I needed a reminder. I needed something to jog my memory or get my wheels turning. And so this was perfect. So I had this little binder I would carry around with all my keywords. And a big reason why this reading was going so south is because of how incredibly closed off this person was being. But I was too early in my journey to realize that that's what the problem was and why nothing was landing. But I reached for my book very proudly. Again, I have a Gemini retrograde Mars in my chart. I am proud to say when I don't know something, and I'll just look it up with you right there, because I'd rather do that than lie to you or scam you or try and give you different information. And I remember her kind of digging at me, saying that she was essentially saying she read tarot better than I did because she was more intuitive with the cards than I was. Well, I've never learned with a book before. And I see this kind of advised a lot. I'm not going to lie. I see a lot of people kind of dogging on references and resource material with tarot. It was probably another huge reason I loved your account so much, because again, we're blending the two together, because we can use our resources and our studies and use that to strengthen our intuition and strengthen our intuitive interpretation.
Yes. Oh my God. Yes. Something that I hear that's like critical of tarot, especially from people who have a stronger oracle card practice, is that tarot has too many rules. Too many rules. I don't want to learn all the rules. And I'm like, no, tarot is more structured than maybe the way some oracle decks are written and created. But there are no rules, really.
No.
It's more like parlay, like they're guidelines.
Yeah. And also, I love my oracle decks. Do not take this, anybody, as a knocking of oracle decks. I have several of them.
No, I
love them. But I use them, I'm so glad you bring this up, in a very different way for very different reasons. I do not show up with specific questions to my oracle decks. My oracle decks are not designed to answer those questions. That's my biggest thing. Oracle deck, love it for setting intentions. Really, really nice when I'm creating like journal prompts and when I need themes and intentions and vibes. I love using oracle decks. If I need to quote unquote keep something in mind, great time to reach for an oracle deck. But when we're talking about like, I'm feeling really weird about this relationship with my coworker and my work situation environment, I really need to sit down and talk with my guides about this and ask for some guidance, I'm going tarot every single time with that.
And I think that it's not because tarot has more rules. It's because it's more specific.
Yes.
It's more specific. It's designed to be more specific. And I think in situations where I maybe feel like I need clarity or a fourth card, that's why I created the Grow with the Flow Spread 2.0. And the fourth card is always an oracle card.
Oh, I love that.
You pull it for best advice, because for me, that feels like kind of like the last button on your sweater to do for the reading. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I do.
And I think that like setting an intention for it, saying this is for best advice on the situation I just read with my tarot, it is different than just saying like, what else? You know what I mean? Like, and I always use an oracle deck for that. I will not pull best advice with the same tarot deck. I don't know why. It just, in my brain, it doesn't make sense.
I like that.
To use tarot for that question all the time, like I intuitively want to go for my oracle deck So it's just funny that you brought that up with
I love
oracle
that.
cards. I love them.
I do too.
I would say that if you are someone who started reading cards with tarot and you're interested in branching out to oracle, I'd really recommend the Animal Spirit deck from the Wild
Yes.
Unknown.
Oh my God, yes. That is one of my all-time favorite oracle decks. I'm so glad you said that.
And the reason that I recommend it is because it's slightly more structured and organized than your average oracle deck. Like, it does have 5 suits for each element, and then a 5th one
for spirit element, I think.
For spirit, for the element of spirit, exactly. And in my brain, that kind of functions as the major arcana.
Yes, I agree.
So if you've been reading tarot for a while and you're interested in poking around with some oracle cards, I highly recommend that deck. I think it would be a very easy transition to tarot. And consequently, if you are an oracle card reader and you're like, oh, I want to learn that tarot stuff, get yourself this oracle deck. I think it works. It's a bridge, honestly. It's a great bridge between the two sides of cartomancy.
Totally. And it might be because Wild Unknown makes both. And maybe it's because they also make, and I have the Animal Spirit deck. It was one of the first decks I've ever gotten. The Wild Unknown Tarot I don't personally have, but I've looked through that deck. I have a bunch of friends who have that deck. It's beautiful as well. And maybe gorgeous. That's why they put in just a little bit of tarot taste into the Animal Spirit deck, but it functions like an oracle deck. I agree. It's really, really beautiful for that.
Totally agree. And I love the Wild Unknown Tarot so much. I have it in 2 versions. I have the standard that I've had forever. And then I think they recently released like a pocket size in a tin.
Oh, I love
And I was like,
yes.
I'm very small in real life. I'm only 4'11". So when I see like tiny tarot things or like tiny crystals,
I love
crystal figurines, I'm like, oh, it's like my size. Like, I'm like, yay.
Oh my gosh. I love this. I love this so much.
Random, but...
So Marisa, tell us, what are your goals with current Hermit? What are you hoping to get out of this journey? Where are you hoping to kind of take it over the next 5-10 years?
I mean, short term, I would love to finish writing my online master course, and I would love to teach more workshops in person. I really enjoy teaching everyone online through social media. It has been so empowering and fulfilling. And it's weirdly healed a lot of my imposter syndrome to be able to help people just through sharing content online and answering questions. It's really built my confidence as a mentor, which I think is great. But I'd love the opportunity to teach more workshops, like full, like, because there's only so much I can teach you in a 7-second reel. Like, you know, like they don't even, the algorithm doesn't even like 15 seconds anymore. It wants like
so stupid.
4 and 7-second tips, you know, it's like, boy. So short term, I would love that. But long term, I would really love to teach tarot and a lunar living lifestyle full time. I would love to be able to write books about learning tarot and living a practical life while following the moon. That would be my ideal long-term situation, is to really, have it fully encompassing so that I'm not so much leading this cute little double life thing I have going on right now, where like I work in a very like corporate office environment. I work in construction administration, so it's a very
so it's very different vibe.
It's very different. It's literally like I can't think of another industry that I could have ended up in my mundane life that is less magical. No offense to people who work in construction, but you're probably laughing because you understand what I mean, right? Like, so I do that by day, and then I have this practice is very close to me, and I would love to be in a place long term where I could just incorporate it into everything that I do,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I still do, incorporate some witchy things when
Yeah.
I'm at the office and at my commute. I think I just did an
I was going to
episode
say, I just did an
like
episode
that on
about
the
this.
podcast, right?
Yeah.
I'm telling you, I was listening to it and I was like, oh my God, I do that. Oh my God, I do that.
I
Wait,
love
that's a
that.
great idea. Like, I was very, very excited about that episode. So like it's possible to incorporate it in little ways, but I would love for it to be like a full integration,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Oh, yeah.
That would
Spoken
just
like a
make my soul
true
happy.
Capricorn moon.
Yeah.
Yeah. That whole time I was like, yeah, this checks out. Cap moon,
Oh
Virgo
my God,
sun,
yes.
Cancer rising. Yeah.
Very God, those two placements in my chart really do riff off each other in such interesting ways. I don't even notice it's happening half the time. It's so natural.
That's what I love about Big Three. I love it. It's like so much of our second nature traits come through in our Big Three that I love, because we don't pay attention to them most of the time. And then we'll say something and look back and we're like, holy moly, astrology is real. It's pretty
really
funny. So, Marisa, potentially the most valuable advice of all, what would you have given yourself as a tarot beginner, knowing what you know now? I think that this is our biggest question we get in any kind of branch or umbrella here in the neighborhood, is if you were in my position, if you were a beginner, what would you tell yourself?
I think that especially as a Virgo sun, I'd say don't be afraid to be wrong. You're going to be wrong in the beginning. Intuition is not something you can memorize the way that you can memorize the card meanings. And you can't be afraid to be wrong because it's going to happen while you're learning to trust yourself and learning to acknowledge your inner truth. It's part of growth. Mistakes are part of growth, especially when you're learning. So be gentle with yourself and be fearlessly wrong if that's what it takes for you to grow. It's okay,
Mm-hmm. I really love that, because a lot of people sit down and never end up even shuffling or pulling a single card because they couldn't think of a question, or they didn't want to ask the wrong question, or it wasn't good enough. It was just a boring question. I hear that all the time. Well, the things that I'm stressed about are like mundane and stupid and trivial. I'm like, so it needs magic.
Yes. So it needs magic. And they probably aren't mundane and stupid and trivial. Like if you're worried about it, it's not trivial.
Yeah.
It's important to you. And it's okay to like hold space for that, you know?
That's totally inner child stuff. So many of us have been told since a young age to like buck up, get over it, swallow it. It's not a big deal, right? When at the time, whatever it was we were crying over was our whole world, right? And so we get older and we minimize those things that to you might be calling them trivial right now. But isn't that a person or a place or a thing you have to encounter like every day or multiple times a week? Kind of sounds like it's a bigger part of your life.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a big deal,
Yes, exactly. And what better solution than getting some insight that you're not crazy, that there's a lesson you can take here, that there's growth happening here. Like I know that tarot gets this stigma of like, it's darker than oracle decks, right? It's harsher. It's going like, again, it's a very bypassing thing. I totally agree. Where there's a lot of people I think skip over tarot because they're afraid of getting their ass handed to them by the cards. But
it's like that meme where like it's like with Professor Trelawney,
yes,
and then I think like a Sister Act meme.
Yes,
and it's like the oracle cards are like, I'm sensing that this might be slightly off kilter for you. And then the tarot deck says, you in danger, girl. Like, it's just like,
yes.
like people think that tarot is harsh. And like, I think it largely depends on the deck that you are getting.
And the place you're in. I'm glad you brought that up.
The place you're in, yes.
Yes, you need to take into consideration your emotional state, your mental state before you sit down and start asking, right? When we're working with tarot, we're asking our intuition and our guides. We're bringing these big players in. What we're asking them for is truth, and I think that's what they provide. And depending on the mental or emotional state that we're in, right, we interpret that or internalize that as, well, this was harsh, this was scary, this was mean. Or are you looking at these relatively neutral-faced cards? Most cards have I always tell clients, they have like holographic features. It's a metaphor where if you look at a card one way on a certain day, it could look one way. But if you look at it in a different mood, something else happened on a different day, it could totally hit in a whole different way.
Mm-hmm.
I really do.
Absolutely.
So this has been so insanely valuable, Marisa. So helpful. I think that I think it's kind of an unnecessarily daunting branch. Like, I think that people look at tarot and go, oh, I can't do that yet. Oh, this is too much. And same thing with astrology. And I love your approach that when we just break things down into whatever is manageable for us at any given time, we can access just as much of its potential as a person who's advanced or been doing it for a really, really long time, right?
Yes, exactly. I think it's so important to be gentle with yourself in the beginning. Not because tarot is harsh, but because it takes time and consistency to build this practice. And the time that you invest in it is completely invaluable. I mean, like, you will create a ritual that will support you throughout your life in the years to come.
100%.
It's such a beautiful thing.
It really, really is. So please, I'm sure that everyone is dying to know, just thank you so much for being here. Before we get off, please let all of us know, where can we find you? Where can we follow you and support you? How can we work with you?
So you can find me on Instagram and TikTok at _current_hermit. I'm sure Danny will put it in the notes so that everybody knows how to spell it. And in the link in both of those bios is the link to my tarot workshop that I am teaching in person at Spirit and Soul Studio. It's called Tarot 101 Reflections of Your Inner Truth. And in this workshop, you're going to learn the basics of tarot and how to use the wisdom of the cards to create the future that you truly want. It's taking place on Sunday, September 18th from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And you can sign up for an in-person spot if you're local. I'd love to meet you. But if not, there are virtual spots available. So you can totally join remotely if that works better for you.
Yay. I'm so excited that you're doing a workshop. I'm so excited that there's this virtual option. I think that I'm hoping that more and more with this big uprising and trend in spirituality and tarot, that more people spend their money on learning for themselves and going to these workshops and these classes, which will help us not get scammed by these scammers.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
As always, I wanted to purposefully do this on the episode with Marisa because it happens to both of us and so many people in our community. We only have one account. We don't create backup accounts. We never will. Any other account that solicits some kind of service or reading or message of some kind in your DMs is not a legitimate spiritual service provider. Period.
It is not.
Never.
Period. And especially if they're pretending to be myself or Danny. Danny, you're not currently
No, I don't even
doing
give
tarot readings for
readings.
other people. Like, that's not a thing you're doing right now,
Nope.
although you had in a past life.
Mhm.
And my entire brand for the
Right.
current Hermit is based on reading tarot for myself and teaching you that you can too. So, under what circumstances would I ever offer you a tarot reading? Like, that doesn't make
Never.
sense.
No, it does not at all. And it is absolutely despicable that people will exploit your beliefs and your spirituality for their own gain like this. But I talk about this on the platforms that I do because the ugly truth of it is that the bigwigs at Insta, at TikTok, do hardly anything about this for any of us. I've had my imposter accounts reported well over hundreds of times, and they're still out there operating. And the truth is, even if they got taken down, they're gonna pop one right back up the next day. They really are. So it's way more beneficial for all of us if we educate you, and hopefully you pass on that message as well. That's always my intent. Let other people know, if your friends, if especially anybody that's like just starting to get into the spiritual community and just starting to follow new, that's who they prey on the most, are people that just started following new witches and just started following tarot because they're just starting out. And they don't know any better. So again, Marissa's Instagram and social media info is in the show notes. It is her only account. Okay. Any others, we report and we block and we move on with our day. But I really wanted to get on my soapbox on this episode because they prey on tarot readers the most. And I think that it's so important that we all band together against these people. So, Marisa, this was just wildly helpful. I mean, I myself learned a lot today. I know that so many of our neighbors did. Thank you for coming on the show.
Danny, thank you so much for having me in the neighborhood today. I had so much fun. I'm super, super excited and honored to have been asked to be a guest, truly.
Oh, thank you. This is not going to be the last time that you're here in the neighborhood with us. I can definitely assure you that. So thank you so, so much. Thank you everybody for tuning in and listening to us today. We are so grateful for your time today and every day. We hope you have an absolutely beautiful rest of your week. Stay safe, have fun, stay magical out there. Hi, neighbor. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of That Witch Podcast. If you want to support the show and get your hands on some really magical goodies, make sure you check out some of the awesome companies that I'm an affiliate for in the show notes below. You can also leave a 5-star rating and review on iTunes as well as Spotify now. And really the best way to support That Witch Podcast is just by sharing the show online, like your social media platforms, or telling a friend that you think would enjoy it. If you're looking for more magical content like bonus episodes, classes I teach, and support in your witchcraft, make sure you come check us out in That Witch School, my magical monthly membership with a very welcoming private online community. And don't forget to subscribe to my email list for weekly astro forecasts, journal prompts, and more, and stay up to date with all of the happenings here in the neighborhood.